on a vassal neoliberal private health state. Joining me now from San Francisco in California for the latest developments as to freeing the earth from the specter of COVID is Dr. Jacob Glanville, who reached out to President Trump when he caught the deadly virus. Jacob, welcome back to Going Underground. So we've heard Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, those companies that Donald Trump used to talk about a lot at the podium at the White House, they've had to stop their trials. Just tell me what you think Trump took before we get on to the wider context of COVID responses. What did Trump take to save his life?
Right. So Trump received 3 different types of medicines. He received them all pretty early, but I actually think that may be the direction that treatment would head. He received an antibody cocktail from a company called Regeneron. He received remdesivir, which is an antiviral from Gilead, and then he received a steroid. Now, these do 3 different things. The antibodies serve to go and neutralize the virus. They get everywhere in the body, except they don't get in the top layer of the lung tissue very well. Then the antiviral, remdesivir, it basically slows down the virus once it's already in a cell from making more copies of itself. And then finally, the steroid, what it really does is it knocks down your immune system. Normally, they give it to you way later in the infection, when their goal is to stop your immune system from overreacting and attacking your lungs, your heart, maybe even your brain. And so they decided to give them all 3 at once. And in this case, it seems like it's been effective.
And just away from COVID just for a second, I've been saying on this show, Regeneron had links to Cuba because the CEO once visited Cuba. I've also been repeating something some mainstream media outlets have, that the Regeneron treatment may have been based on fetal stem cells. I understand I've been talking rubbish?
Half truth. So in 1973, there was a study in the Netherlands where they isolated a HEC293, human embryonic kidney cell number 293. This is a human cell. It was derived from a fetus. And that cell was immortalized, so you can grow never-ending copies of it. And over the next 50 years, those copies of the tubes of that cell ended up in laboratories all over the world, such that most biotechnology companies use HEC293 as just a default cell. If you want to grow proteins that come out of human cells, but you don't have to go find a person and take their tissue, then you can use HEC293. And so that's been used by laboratories all over the world to generate the virus. But it's safe to say that every biotechnology group who's been working on the coronavirus crisis probably used HEC293 at certain points during their research.
Okay, well, it'll be up to Amy Coney Barrett, presumably on the Supreme Court, to figure out whether the angles there on Roe versus Wade, certainly that context. Back to the actual vaccine. You think that we shouldn't be overly concerned about the fact there's not been as yet a peer-reviewed third level trial vaccine?
Yeah, so I mean, we need those trials, but I am an optimist that the vaccines are going to work. I've seen the data so far from multiple different vaccines, and they're all exceeding expectations. The threshold was set pretty low by the FDA of 50% effectiveness. I think we're seeing in excess of 80%. The vaccines are eliciting antibodies, and we know antibodies can provide protection. Some of the vaccines are also stimulating T cells. We do still need those phase 3 trials where they give the vaccine to a whole bunch of people, because those are the trials where you start picking up rare but potentially important side effects. And it's also in the phase 3 trials when you're actually letting a bunch of people out into society and seeing if they get sick or not. So there was one of the trials, to wit, that was paused because of a couple subjects who seemed like they had neurological inflammation after receiving the vaccine. So they're checking to see, is this just a coincidence, or is the presence of this vaccine somehow causing the immune system to attack? Maybe this person was infected with the coronavirus and now it's attacking their nerves. Maybe the vaccine causes some neurological attack. This is very rare, but it is something that has been observed in vaccines previously.
Is that the AstraZeneca AZD1222, which some people have already been saying they may have restarted the trials too soon? I'm not sure what your view is. The Oxford vaccine.
I would need to see the data to know. I think there have been cases of Guillain-Barré syndrome associated with vaccines previously, so this is not unprecedented. And we know that the coronavirus does infect neuronal tissue. That's one of the unique things about this virus, and we've been knowing this whole year, is that there is a risk that this virus gets out of the lungs. It can infect heart tissue, it can infect brain tissue, neurons. So we need to keep in mind with our vaccines and with our antibody therapies, that there's going to be some group of people that while the vaccine is kicking in, they may get infected. And so that's what we're checking for, is to make sure the vaccine doesn't inadvertently start causing tissue attack. Now, again, we're not confirmed that that's a problem yet. It may be just fine, but that's certainly something scientists are thinking about.
I mean, last time you were on, we talked a little bit about how big multinational pharmaceutical companies seem to be benefiting from research money. Has that improved since I last spoke to you?
Not yet. Look, I'm happy that we have antibody therapies from these big companies. They've obviously spent billions of dollars in many decades paving the way for technologies that I now use. But it would help, I think, for there to be more chips on the table on more technology companies. So my company in particular, our antibody is different than the other big companies. We chose to turn off part of the antibody that causes activation of the immune system. And this was a safety feature. We were concerned that you could potentially help a patient by giving the antibody to block the virus, but at the same time, it may cause inflammation that could be problematic. I think what companies and countries should choose to do is invest in multiple choices, because we do not know yet which one's effective. We do know that the Lilly Abcelera molecule has just been paused because of safety concern. Now, we don't know what that is, and it may be unrelated, but
a mystery illness is all we know, because this is all top secret stuff from the big pharma companies.
So imagine that is a safety effector function problem. Regeneron's going to have the same problem, and you would really want to have in your back pocket an alternative solution, such as our molecule, which may be protected from that. So that's the reason you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. I think everybody thinks there's going to be this great vaccine party when the vaccines pop up. Vaccines are great. I'm glad we have them, but the truth is not everyone's going to take them. They don't work on everybody, and there's a delay before they kick in. And you add all that up, and we're going to have a very confusing 2021 where people are going to continue to overwhelm the hospital system. So that's why we need a therapy and a vaccine, and that's what's going to get the world back on track. And I think that message didn't really permeate for the first half of 2020.
I mean, the weird thing is, I suppose it permeates better with the public at large, maybe, than stenographer journalists who just read the big pharma press releases. Where are you at with your treatment for coronavirus?
Yeah, so we were fortunate that first off, my company is profitable. I develop antibodies for about 50 different pharmaceutical companies. So I was able to invest my own money into pursuing this therapy because I believed it was necessary. We benefited from 5 laboratories across 3 nations that helped us validate that our molecule was neutralizing the coronavirus and protected hamsters from getting sick. And then we benefited from Charles River Laboratories, supported our safety and toxicity research. And then we're working with 2 great companies, Atom and Millipore Sigma. They're doing our manufacturing of the drug product. So this puts us in a position to start our studies early in the new year. We are knocking on doors still in the United States, and we're beginning to talk to other countries as well, because additional resources could accelerate that, so we could potentially start in December. But either way, the studies, once they start, they're fast, because unlike a vaccine study where you have to give a bunch of shots to a whole bunch of people and then wait a long time for the vaccine to kick in, and then wait longer, another 3 months to see if they're protected, with an antibody therapy, the studies are a few weeks, because you grab people when they show up in a hospital, you test them, they're COVID positive, you slap an IV on their arm, and then over the next 10 days, you know whether the drug worked or not. And that means that you can move very quickly through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. That's the good news. Bottom line is our medicine will be available mid 2020.
Well, given you're the star of that Netflix film, maybe you should get money from them. But talking about other countries, I mean, I've got to ask the geopolitical, let alone the K Street big pharma angle to funding for these things. The U.S. National Counterintelligence Security Center, apparently, it says that Russia, China, and Iran are preventing the U.S. from getting a COVID vaccine. Now, one presumes, do they mean the Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine, which tens of thousands have taken? But then the press here say Russia's lying about that vaccine. What are the geopolitical stakes, especially in the context of you maybe getting funding from abroad, of this panacea to coronavirus?
So look, as a computational biologist and an algorithm developer, there's this concept called boosting, which says that if you're building an algorithm to solve a problem, it's actually better to have multiple different solutions and then have them all sort of compete to create a solution. It's sort of what we're having globally. And I'm actually glad that there are multiple different vaccine solutions all over the world. Obviously, they need to be tested in a useful way, and we need to accurately report the results. There are governments and companies that have self-interest here that may misalign with the public good. And I think that's something we need to keep an eye on. But ultimately, we have a challenge, and that is that no single entity is going to produce enough vaccine to protect the whole earth, and we need to do that. And so we're actually better off having multiple options that work a little different, and they're all doing different manufacturing so we can make enough doses out there. And then we will shift gears to whatever vaccine works the best as it becomes available.
While the lockdowns continue, I mean, here there's a talk about it, I'm sure, in the United States. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker at the House, said U.S. regulations are tougher than the ones over here in Britain. Maybe the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine might not even be able to be used in the United States. Are these sorts of criteria really going to make a big difference to the response in some countries and not in others as regards COVID?
Yeah, I think there are going to be some differences. And that is something that we spend some time on for our antibody therapy. We run into this issue, right? So we're a US-based company. We focus on talking with the FDA. And because in theory, there could have been large amounts of public money available, although we haven't accessed the majority of it. But at the same time, it's a problem for us. I would be deeply unsatisfied. And in fact, it does not solve the problem if our drug just is available in the US and groups that accept the decisions by the FDA on what constitutes an acceptable medicine. That is part of the world, but you have to consider all the different regions of the world. And if we are serious as a collective human society about ending this pandemic, then we need to make sure that the medicines are accessible and affordable. If the medicines aren't accessible, people can't take them. And what we know is that those people will just keep reinfecting everyone else. Even if you're a psychopath, you should still want to have everyone on the world have medicine. And it needs to be affordable as well. This has been a major problem I've seen so far, is that people are aiming to produce these medicines. There are large corporations who are looking there and saying, oh, we're going to make in excess of $10 billion in 2020. That's great for them if it would motivate them to solve the problem, but it actually hasn't been, because if they're charging so much per dose that not everyone can afford it, then again, there's going to be many people who are going to continue to reinfect the rest of us, and we do not solve this.
Dr. Jacob Glanville, thank you.
Thank you.
After the break.